Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming in this cold night to share some thoughts about the spiritual life. And also welcome all those who are joining us on the internet. Thank you for joining us. Today we are going to explore a subject that is, I think, fairly interesting, but it's also important, because not necessarily what is interesting is important also. Many times things acquire a commercial flavor, and they are not very useful really for the spiritual life. But the nature of what is called the third eye is something that is important for our spiritual life. So in popular culture, the idea of the third eye is that it is somewhere around, the forehead. Probably most of you are familiar with the depictions in the Hindu gods. They have usually a third eye on the forehead. And maybe this idea of a third eye became really popular in the West through a book that was published in the 50s. Probably many of you have read it, by Lobsang Rampa, which was called The Third Eye. But before that, as far as I can tell, the first person that spoke about the third eye widely in public and wrote about it in modern times was Madame Blavatsky around the 1880s. Before that, we have a reference to a third eye in Plato, actually not in his writings, but there is a Christian church father who was Origen of Alexandria, and he was writing against Celsus, who was a Platonist at the time, and he said, well, Christianity it's closer to the truth because it makes more sense in many ways. For example, Platonists say that Plato had a third eye through which he could see things divine. So there is a reference. This was written in the probably 500 CE or around that time. So we have some reference to the idea of a third eye also in the West. But for the most part, I think we are familiar with this from the Hindu deities. Now, when we come to the functions of the third eye, there are descriptions that they don't necessarily fit when we compare them. Because, for example, it is said that the third eye, let us see the functions that are said to belong to the third eye. So, for example, the idea of clairvoyance, when a person opens or awakens the third eye, becomes clairvoyant. That means that it's able to see auras, chakras, entities, like subtle entities like angels or devas. Another idea related to the third eye is the idea of, for example, precognition, to see the future. A person that has the third eye active could see the future. Another idea related to it is, or the idea of the out-of-body experiences, astral traveling. And then also the third eye is related to religious visions. Then also to wisdom, to enlightenment. So all these things may seem similar to a person. Well, they are all kind of, not physical, so they may belong to more or less the same realm, the same kind of experiences, but actually they belong to two completely different realms. Clairvoyance, precognition, out-of-body experiences, these are all psychic experiences. They are related to psychism. Religious visions and wisdom, enlightenment, they are, let's say, mystical experiences. And there is a big difference between the two. In general, well, some people think there is only the physical plane, and there are only the physical senses, the 5 senses we know. These are materialistic people, and they say everything that is not, physical or psychological through the brain doesn't exist. Now, there are some other people that say, well, there is the physical and there is the spiritual. So this idea of physical and spiritual. Now, by spiritual, they mean everything that is not physical. And some movements are based on that very basic distinction, physical and spiritual. If it is not physical, it's assumed to be spiritual. In the theosophical literature, there is a classification that is more detailed, and I will provide a simpler form, which is enough for our purposes tonight. But in between the physical and the spiritual, there is, as I was saying, the psychic. Both the physical and the psychic belong to the personal level. That means, we have the physical senses. We are able to see through our eyes. There is also a psychic seeing, where we can see things that are not physical. Or we can hear physical sounds. There is also a psychic hearing that the person hears astral bells or whatever they call them, sounds that are not really physical. And like that, many other things. We can move physically, or we can move on the astral plane with these out-of-body experiences. So the psychic is really an extension of the physical senses. It's neither good or bad. The thing is that the psychic will not bring you necessarily wisdom, peace, happiness. You are enlarging your world, and you can be happier or more miserable with a wider world. What really brings happiness, peace, wisdom is the development of our spiritual aspect. The spiritual aspect is the source of all these things that we are really looking for. Harmony, peace, joy, compassion, wisdom. It is by developing our spiritual nature that we can really change our life, our experience of life. So these psychic manifestations, as I said, belong to a more personal aspect of ourselves. And the mystical manifestations belong to the spiritual aspect. So why is it that all these different experiences are related to the third eye? Well, the answer is that there are two different realities or centers, or call it what you will. There are two different centers that are called the third eye. They are completely different, and most people are not aware of this. That's why there is so much confusion about or as to what the third eye produces when it is open in a person. So in Hinduism, for example, the idea of the third eye is connected with what is called the Ajna chakra. You have the idea of chakras in Hinduism, which are subtle centers of energy, and there are 7 of them, and the 6th chakra is in the position of the forehead. So this is also known as the brow chakra. This chakra, when you see the description in Hindu literature, is related to clairvoyance and precognition, to all the psychic function of our consciousness. So when the third eye is being related to the Ajna chakra, which is on the forehead, then we have these psychic manifestations. In Hinduism, it was not called third eye because this is not an eye. Probably it's related, or the word third eye was associated with the Ajna chakra because of the position, and also because it produces astral seeing, this clairvoyance. But it's not really an eye. And in Hinduism, I don't think in the past, they used to call it third eye. I never found the phrase third eye in the ancient text. They call it the eye of Shiva. Shiva is one of their deities. So, or they have other Sanskrit names, but they don't mean third eye. So I think that was more of a Western association of the concept of the third eye with the Ajna chakra. Now in theosophy, the third eye, as I was saying, is something different. Blavatsky says that in the past, far in the past, when the evolution of humanity began, it was a real eye. So that is why it is called the third eye. The idea is that the earth evolves. In science, we know that at the beginning of the evolution of the earth, it was not really dense or physical. It is more gaseous and liquid. And in theosophy, it is said that the evolution of humanity began along with the evolution of the earth. But of course, human beings were not physical at the time. They couldn't live in an earth that wasn't solid. So human beings were like probably the stage that is similar to a fetus. They were on earth, but their consciousness was still very primitive, and they didn't have really a physical structure. It was more of an ethereal structure. At that time, both human beings and animals also, the whole evolution goes along with the planet. So animals and human beings, it is said that had only one eye, and that eye was actually on the back of the head. This may seem odd, but if you see in the brain, what the center for the visual perception is at the back of the head, the occipital part of the brain. So the idea is that there was an eye there when we are not still physical. Now, as humanity became more and more physical, began to develop the two frontal eyes, and what was a third eye began to shrink and retreat to the center of the skull. Now, as this happened, of course, the body became more dense, so that eye lost the physical function, but still retained a spiritual function, because this eye at the beginning of the evolution was both a physical eye and a spiritual eye. So as humanity became more and more physical, the third eye loses the physical function, but retains the spiritual function. And then as humanity evolved and became physical, became more in touch with the animal instincts, became more sensual and passionate, then little by little, that spiritual eye began to enter into dormancy and became what today is the pineal gland. So according to Blavatsky, the pineal gland was actually an eye, and today it is a gland. Now this is supported by science to some aspects of this theory, because the pineal gland was discovered to have a retina, just like our eyes. It has visual pigments, and it is kind of active in some animals, in fish, in some lizards. So science says, yeah, this was a functional eye at some point, but right now it's not functional, of course. So the idea that the pineal gland was an eye at a certain point in evolution is accepted by science today. So in theosophy, we connect the idea of the third eye with the pineal gland. Now, if you compare with the chakra system, the pineal gland, different organs have a connection with different chakras. So the idea is that the pineal gland is connected to the seventh chakra, which is in Hinduism is called Sahasrara. This is sometimes called the crown chakra. And when you see the description of the crown chakra, the activity of the crown chakra is related to this mystical aspect. It's related to wisdom, enlightenment, to religious experiences. So this fits perfectly well in how theosophy describes the function of the pineal gland, because in theosophy, the pineal gland is not related to clairvoyance, it's related to spiritual intuition, to wisdom. And Blavatsky said that what was related to the Ajna chakra is another gland that is closely associated with the pineal, which is the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is related to the Ajna chakra, and the pineal gland is related to the Sahasrara chakra. So we have these two glands. The pituitary gland has to do with the psychic development. The pineal gland has to do with the more spiritual or mystical development. The two of them work very closely, not so much physiologically, but on a more esoteric plane. I will explain that. But the two of them work very closely. So let us see now how we can begin to work with these two glands. So first, let me say something. When today in the West, most of the approaches to the third eye are related to meditations where the person tries to manipulate the prana and direct it to a particular chakra, or with kundalini. Human beings have three aspects. We have a body, let's say that's our material aspect, matter. We have also energy, life, and other kinds of energies. So there is an energy aspect. And then we have a consciousness. This is our consciousness aspect. These three aspects are different. They are different aspects of one single nature. But on our body, they act in connection but separate. So some people may think consciousness and energy are the same. They are actually two different manifestations of a same unitive principle. So, for example, there are some techniques to awaken these glands that are related to the physical body. This is, for example, the techniques in Hatha Yoga. Not so much the Hatha Yoga as we know it in the West, the asanas, so all that is a fairly basic approach to the Hatha Yoga. But in India, the Hatha Yoga involves the attempt, and many times success, to control everything in the body. They can control their heart activity, their blood circulation, digestion. They are able to produce states in their body where the body becomes completely stiff, like when a person dies. So the idea of the Hatha Yoga in India, the complete discipline, is to stop all physical functions so that consciousness cannot work anymore through the body, and it goes up to the next state of consciousness. There are some techniques that are related to energy. These are very famous today. Some decades ago, the idea of consciousness was fashionable. So everybody was talking about consciousness and expansion of consciousness. Then the idea of energy became more and more prevalent. And today there is a lot of activity at the level of energy and trying to manipulate the different energies we have. This has to do with the chakras and kundalini and pranayama. Pranayama is the stopping of the breathing. And then we have consciousness. We can awaken the third eye by raising our consciousness to spiritual states. So this has to do with, now, you cannot do this with specific techniques. Some techniques will help, but it requires a much more integral part or attitude in life. And we are going to deal with this. Now, Theosophy says that the safest way to develop anything in ourselves is by working at the level of consciousness. Now, this is also proposed by Raja Yoga. There are these three different schools in the world. You have the schools that are related to the Hatha Yoga methods. They work at the level of the matter and the physical. Also some energy. You have the Tantric approach. They work a lot with energy, and some with consciousness. Or you have the Raja Yoga approach that they work mainly at the level of consciousness. Or the Vedanta, which is a Jnana Yoga approach, is also mainly at the level of consciousness. Theosophy belongs to that group. Because the idea is that you can awaken any center in your body through these three methods. But consciousness will tell you or will determine where you are going to be aware. So, for example, the pituitary gland is like a door. It's a door that opens the realities of the astral plane. Now, the astral plane has different levels. The lowest level is what we usually call hell. And it's a very dense level with the soul of peoples who were, very aggressive. And it's a level that nobody wants to go to. In all the myths, when it is said, for example, that Jesus went to hell and then he came back, or any initiate has to go to hell and then come back, because to be an initiate, they have to know all the planes in the universe. Now, normal people, they never go to those lower levels because they are really bad levels. They are with a lot of suffering. So you have that on the lower end, or you have on the highest end of the astral plane, you have things that are very close to what we regard as heaven. Though heaven is on a plane that is above that. But the point is that there is a whole different, the astral plane is like a world, a whole world. In the physical world, you have places that are very harmonious and you have places that are terrible. So the same on the astral plane. Now, if you open, the Ajna chakra, you will have access to the astral plane. Now, to what level? That will depend on the quality of your astral nature. The astral nature is related to emotions, is related to your degree of spirituality in the sense of love and compassion and selfishness. So in Theosophy, as in some other traditions, the idea is the advice is don't try to open these doors by forcing them through energy or through physical means, because you may not be ready to go to the places that are good, so to say. This happens also with drugs. Some drugs, what they do, they disrupt the work of the pituitary and the pineal, and they open the doors. But some people have terrible experiences because, as I was saying, they go to lower levels of the astral plane. So the idea is, yes, you can force the opening of these things by manipulating your energy or by a certain physical discipline, but that is kind of dangerous. But if you work at the level of your consciousness, then when the doors are open, you will be connecting with the higher realms of these planes. So in theosophy, when you see the techniques that are proposed and the way of life, they all point out to work on the expansion and raising of your consciousness. So that's what we are going to explore next. So let us see. We have seen the connection between the physical aspect of what we call the third eye, which is the pineal gland. Then there is a subtler aspect of the third eye that is the crown chakra. But it also has a correspondence or a connection with states of consciousness. So in theosophy, we talk about 7 different principles of consciousness. Now I will focus only on 3, which are related to what we are talking about. There is one that is called buddhi. This is a Sanskrit word. The root is bud, and it means illumination or wisdom. And the word Buddha comes from the same root. And this principle is the source of spiritual intuition. Intuition in the sense of not as a precognition. The word intuition means a knowledge that is acquired in a direct way, not through reasoning or through your senses, in a spiritual way. So spiritual intuition, or we can call it spiritual wisdom. Then there is another principle in Sanskrit manas, which is what we could call the spiritual mind. This is a lower principle, if you compare it with the spiritual wisdom, but it's the one that will receive the wisdom. Now, these manas, when it comes down to the physical plane, we are talking down and up just in a symbolic way, it becomes what we know as our mind, our normal mind. That's sometimes called in theosophy the lower mind. That lower mind many times gets entangled with the desires and passions and selfishness. So part of the spiritual life is to try to bring the mind in touch with buddhi instead of in touch with the selfish nature that is in every one of us. But there is an aspect of the lower mind, of our normal mind, which is called, again in Sanskrit, antahkarana. This means like the inner organ. And the idea is that the antahkarana is the aspect of our normal mind that aspires to the spiritual. You know, when something happens in life, many times you see the 2 options. Either you do something that you know is wrong, but that you really want to do it either because it protects you or gives you something, or, you know, that is a tendency of our mind when it is entangled with our selfish aspect. The antahkarana is that aspect of the mind that says, no, this is the greater good. This is, you know, what is right to do. Nobody can tell you what is right or wrong, but the aspect in yourself that says this is the right thing to do, that is the antahkarana. So we could call the spiritual aspiration. Every time that we have the aspiration to do the right thing, or things related to compassion, love, charity, the antahkarana is working. Now, these three aspects are connected to the glands that we were talking about. And actually, two of them with the glands and booty with another organ in the body that we are going to explore. So this antahkarana is connected to the pituitary gland. This spiritual mind is connected to the pineal gland. And the spiritual intuition is connected to the heart. Now, we know the physical aspect of these organs. You know, the pineal gland at the physical level produces melatonin. That's a hormone that has to do with the cycle of waking up and going to sleep, and with several cycles in nature. The pituitary gland secretes like 9 hormones. It is related to different aspects of the body. Some of them are related to the growth hormones. Some of them are related to the oxytocin, to, you know, when you are having a baby, the contractions, different things. Now, and the heart, of course, is the pump in our body. These are all the physical functions. But every organ has also a spiritual aspect, a spiritual function. So as we were saying, the pituitary gland is related to the psychic perception. The pineal gland is related to a more spiritual perception. And the heart is related to the spiritual intuition. Now, in a normal person, the pineal gland is only related to the mental consciousness. Every time that we think, the aura of the pineal gland is vibrating. And this vibration is transmitted to the pituitary gland and to the heart. Now, the heart is the vehicle for the spiritual intuition, but it is silent in our body because it's not part of our mental consciousness. So we all have this spiritual intuition potentially, but we are not aware of it. Therefore, for us, it's like if it doesn't exist. We are all wise people, but we are not aware of that aspect. We are aware of our fears, our ambition, our desires. We are not aware of the wisdom in ourselves. The way that we can become aware of that and eventually get enlightenment is when the heart and the pineal gland connect. Then the pineal gland will bring this spiritual intuition into the realm of the mental awareness. So the spiritual practice is that we need for this is something that connects what we call buddhi with manas, that will connect the heart with the pineal gland. Now, these organs will be fully awakened only through the awakening of Kundalini. I don't want to go too much into this because, you know, in the theosophical view, the evolution of humanity takes millions and millions of years, just like the planet. And the awakening of Kundalini will happen naturally in most of humanity several millions of years in the future. Right now, the idea, again, trying to, from the theosophical point of view, and I emphasize the theosophical point of view because there are other traditions that say different, and we respect that. But from our point of view, and some other traditions also support that, trying to awaken Kundalini right now is something that, for the most part, produces more problems than not. So these organs will be fully awakened only when Kundalini is awakened, but that will happen naturally as we develop the consciousness aspect of our nature. So the idea is, if we work on expanding our consciousness and trying to put in touch our mind with the spiritual in us, then Kundalini will rise at its own time by itself with no dangers. So I want to talk about a few techniques that will help at the level of consciousness, not at the level of energy, will help to expand our consciousness. So, for example, the heart was always very important in all traditions, spiritual traditions. You have a meditation in the heart almost in every tradition. You know, in Hinduism, there is a meditation where the Purusha, which is a spirit, is in the heart. In Tibetan Buddhism, you have the whole deity yoga where you visualize different deities in the heart. Even in Christianity, especially in Orthodox Christianity, you have what they call the Jesus prayer, which is a prayer where you focus your awareness on the heart. So in theosophy, there are also some teachings regarding the meditation in the heart. And I say in the heart because the idea is, Blavatsky says, usually the pineal gland vibrates and affects the heart. But the heart is the vehicle for the spiritual awareness. So we have to reverse that. The heart has to become active and the pineal gland has to become receptive. When that happens, then our mental awareness becomes open to the spiritual awareness. So the idea is, well, if you identify yourself with any part of your body, probably most of us will say we are in our heads, we are the thinker. Now that is where our awareness is fixed today. The meditation in the heart tries to switch that awareness to the heart so that we begin to produce this shift. Now, to do that, we have to do it in a particular way. The idea with the meditation in the heart is that the mind has to become more and more quiet so that it can become receptive to the spiritual intuition. One way to stimulate the pituitary gland in a safe way is through visualization. Every time that we visualize something, the spiritual function of the pituitary gland activates. So that's why the meditation in the heart is usually accompanied by a lot of visualization. If you see in Tibetan Buddhism, for example, they have very complex visualizations of deities with a lot of details and things in their hands and sitting on different things. Because the idea is to stimulate the pituitary gland. Blavatsky says that as the pituitary gland begins to vibrate, it awakens the pineal gland. Now, the pituitary and the pineal are all in the brain. So there are like two different directions that tend to awaken the pineal gland. The pituitary gland awakens the pineal at the level of the mental awareness. But the heart awakens the pineal to the spiritual awareness. So the idea is that in this meditation, you are trying to stimulate the spiritual aspect of the pituitary gland through a visualization, and also the spiritual intuition that comes from the heart. So going to the technique, the idea is try to position your awareness at the level of the heart. Now here, there is a warning, because when we talk about heart, we are not talking about the physical heart. The physical heart has the function of being a pump. And if we put our awareness on the physical heart, if that awareness is really deep, we can even affect the functioning of the heart. Actually, that is what the Hatha yogis do. What we are talking about when we talk about the heart is the spiritual aspect of the heart. And it is said that that the aura of the heart is a little outside the physical body. So when you do this visualization, you don't have to do it inside the physical organ, but try to visualize that there is a center here, just outside the body at the level of the heart, and that you are like watching your room or perceiving from the heart. This in itself is quite difficult. Most people will need months of practice until they feel comfortable and they feel that they are at that level. Because our tendency, we are so fixed on our mental awareness that we tend to imagine the heart down there as if we are watching from our head. So the idea is to first try to practice so that you feel that your awareness is at the level of the heart, in the center of your chest. You can do that by maybe imagining that your body, is higher, your head is higher above you, so that you have this sensation that you are at the level of your chest, or in whatever way you can. But this is a first step, trying to center your awareness in your heart. Then the second thing that you try to do is to visualize in front of you whatever represents to you what is sacred. It could be God or Jesus or Mary, the Mother Mary if you are Christian or Catholic. It can be Krishna if you are Hindu. It can be whatever, or if you don't have any religion, whatever brings to your mind, to your awareness, the idea of sacredness. It can be your higher self, some symbol that what you visualize is not important. What is important is what you are evoking with your meditation. So you center in your heart, then you visualize in front of you the spiritual consciousness. And then what you have to do in the meditation is, little by little, lose the sense that you are your body, that you are yourself. Not lose consciousness. These are two different things. If you lose awareness, you enter into a state of trance, and that doesn't have any spiritual effect. Entering into a state of trance, that happens because your awareness went beyond, or your consciousness went beyond a level in which you can keep aware. What we need to do, the spiritual nature is in every one of us. The problem is that we are not aware of it. So what we need to do is to try to raise our consciousness, always keeping the awareness. So we are not talking about losing awareness. But in the meditation, you begin to lose the awareness that you are your personality. In some techniques in Tibetan Buddhism, they say, feel that you are the deity. They say, be proud as a deity, not pride, the personal pride. Just feel, I'm not this, because we are the one. So they say, feel that you are the deity, not the personality that you usually identify with. So this aspect of meditation, the idea is to begin to feel one with that symbol of the sacred, of the spiritual. And the last step is to drop everything and just stay in silence. Because it's in this deep silence where our mental awareness, and therefore the pineal and the pituitary glands, are receptive to the impressions from the heart. So when the visualization was deep enough, drop everything and just stay in a state of being. Not doing, not trying to control your thoughts, not trying to visualize anything, just be in that state. Actually, Blavatsky says this is the pranayama. Pranayama means yama is like cessation and prana is associated with the breathing. So usually pranayama is taken as stopping your breathing. Now Blavatsky says there are actually two kinds of pranayama. The pranayama where you stop your breathing, and the pranayama where you stop your mental consciousness. Mental consciousness, again, not the awareness, but the idea that you are your mind. And she says it is when you stop your identification with your mind that the third eye opens. So that is what this kind of meditation aims at producing a deep state where we are identified with the spiritual and when our mind is in complete silence. Now, along with all this, obviously during our daily life, because, for how long can you meditate? You maybe meditate, for most people, you meditate 20 or 30 minutes every day. If a person has a daily meditation, That's something that not many people have. A person may meditate 3 times a day, or whatever amount of time you meditate. Most of us are living in the world. We are not in a monastery, so we cannot meditate the whole day. So if during our meditation we are trying to do this, but then during the rest of our daily life, we are not stimulating any of these aspects of our aspiration to the spiritual or the spiritual mind or the spiritual intuition, but we are stimulating the personal and selfish and ambitious self, then the meditation is going to do very little. So along with the meditation, we need to start living spiritually our life. And that's something that, Theosophy always emphasizes a lot, because a technique that is divorced from your daily living is not going to produce much, especially if you are aiming at a spiritual aspect. To produce psychic results is relatively easy. You can be the worst person in the world and you can awaken your psychic senses. Now, as I said, that usually produces more problems than not. So if you are trying to work on awakening your spiritual aspect, you need to, little by little, stimulate all these aspects also in your daily living. But of course, in a talk in 1 hour, we cannot cover all the aspects. I just thought about giving a particular technique that is aimed at stimulating this aspect. But as I said, that by itself is not going to be enough. One more thing that I think is interesting, although is probably not very pleasant to hear, but the pineal gland and the pituitary gland, they have a particular flux of blood. Most parts of the brain they have like a filter through which the blood goes, but these 2 glands are outside that filter. And especially the pineal gland is one of the glands that receive more blood than any other gland in the body. So what we take in affect very strongly the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. Especially, Blavatsky said that if you are really working hard on this aspect, in normal people, nothing happens. But if a person is really seriously working on these aspects, then there are certain physical disciplines or way of life that the person should be aware of. So she says, for example, that the use of wine, liquors of any kind, or any narcotic or intoxicating drug is strictly prohibited for the people who are working on this. In the East, where they have a guru and the disciple, this is strictly prohibited. If indulged in, all progress is hindered, and the efforts of teacher and pupil alike are rendered useless. All such substances have a directly pernicious action upon the brain, and especially upon the third eye or pineal gland. They prevent absolutely the development of the third eye, called in the East the eye of Shiva. And then she says, drunkenness and fever cause disorderly motion in the pituitary body, and so produce illusions of sight, visions, hallucinations. This body, the pituitary, is sometimes so affected by drunkenness that it is paralyzed, and the strict forbiddance of alcoholic liquids to all students of occultism turns on this effect which alcohol produces on the pituitary body and the pineal gland. So the idea is, as I was saying, that the whole life has to little by little be adjusted. Usually a small amount of alcohol is not going to affect much, but if a person is really meditating and really trying to follow a spiritual life that is going to stimulate these aspects, what is always recommended is not to use any of these substances because they will go against what this person is trying to do, and sometimes it may even produce some problems. Most people have the pineal gland calcified. This is something in science they know. They say in most people when they are 50, it is completely calcified. And now later on there were researches that this research was here in the US, so I don't know in other parts of the world, but it's probably the same. But that kids as young as 13 years old had already calcified the pineal gland. And that calcification, which the doctors say this is because of the fluorine in our water and this and that, but Blavatsky talked about that much before, 120 years ago, and she said that is because the pineal gland is not being used spiritually speaking, so these deposits of calcium happen just because it is inactive. So in most people, probably their pineal glands are not even really, sensitive or too sensitive to wine or to drugs. But in spiritual people, I'm sure the glands are much more sensitive to these things. So, it's something to keep in mind. Nothing is good when we do it with violence, like right away, but gradually we should try to be aware of the direction we want to go and direct willingly, to that direction. So this is more or less what I wanted to share. Now we can open to comments or questions about this, both here and on the internet. Ed has some.
You mentioned that you have to incorporate something within your whole life. And wouldn't you say that's the service aspect of life that would keep those three things going?
Yeah, service is one aspect. For example, service, I think, affects a lot the antahkarana, that aspiration to do good for people, not only for ourselves. A genuine act of service can be anything. We are walking, we see something on the floor, and many times we say, I'm not going to stop and pick it up, I better keep walking. But if we just do it because then we are protecting the environment for everybody, that is an act of service. I'm not saying that you are a saint because you do that. My point is that every little thing that we do for the greater good, no matter how small it seems, is part of functioning in this state of consciousness, in the state of consciousness of aspiration for the good. When we are concerned about ourselves and only ourselves, we are working on a lower level, which in theosophy is called kama manas. That's the selfish mind. So as long as we work in these kama manas, all these aspects remain dormant. We have to start shifting our awareness from the selfish mind to this aspiration. Then the spiritual mind is also stimulated by the spiritual aspiration. And for example, a serious study of spirituality, of life from a spiritual point of view greatly stimulates the spiritual mind. And the spiritual intuition is also stimulated by that and by anything that is related to love, to compassion. So service also stimulates the spiritual intuition. So in the Theosophical Society, we usually say service, meditation, and study are three major avenues that help us develop in an integral way.
So are you saying that the heart, when it's stimulated with love, also then affects the pineal gland? Mm-hmm. But then I thought I also heard you say that the pineal gland can affect the heart too. Mm-hmm. So how does the other way work with the pineal affecting the heart?
Yeah, the normal action of the pineal gland, the aura, Blavatsky says, the vibration of the aura of the pineal gland, always awakens a response at the level of the heart. So when the pineal gland is left by itself, it is the organ of mental awareness, not necessarily spiritual, mental awareness. This was even proposed by Descartes. Descartes was a French philosopher, and he said the pineal gland is the seat of the soul, is the connection between the immaterial soul and the physical body. So there was a suspicion in the past of the central role of the pineal gland. Now, the thing is that when the pineal gland is active, it's like, there is a wise person whispering something, but we are talking very loud, so we never hear what the person says. And the person will keep quiet. If we don't listen, then the person will keep quiet. So the heart is always trying to whisper what is right, but our mental awareness is so active that is, shutting off what comes from the heart. So that is why the idea is, as we silence our mind, then we are making because I don't want to introduce too many elements, but every one of these organs vibrate in 7 different, or can vibrate in 7 different rates. The lower ones are related to a personal activity, and the higher ones are related to a spiritual activity. So it is only when we are trying to lead the spiritual life that the pineal gland is a vehicle of the spiritual mind. Otherwise, it's a vehicle of mind, of mental awareness in general. So as we silence our normal mind, what happens is that the pineal gland gets receptive to the heart, and the vibrations of the heart awaken, like, in music, that you can sound certain notes and that will awaken other notes that are in tune with it. So the vibration of the heart will awaken the higher aspect of, or the higher vibration of the pineal gland. Then it becomes a spiritual mind. So I would say that the main effect is that we shut off the spiritual intuition that comes through the heart. First there and then you.
Thanks. I guess my question is, once you've achieved this point, what's it used for? Is it an accolade, like a milestone of your achievement, or can you use the insights for something else?
Mm-hmm. Well, two things about the question, which is the first question that probably most of us ask. I know that I always ask that kind of question. Now, that question belongs to our normal mind, which in theosophy is called the lower mind, because, you say, okay, why would I bother? What is there to, what can I gain? And that is how this mind works in every one of us. Now, for example, I think I gave this example in some other lecture, but if you describe what love is, you say real love makes you sacrifice yourself for the person, makes you, stop doing things that you would enjoy just to please the other person. So the lower mind would say, why would you love? That seems completely useless. But love in itself is a state that is self-fulfilling. So living on the spiritual aspect is self-fulfilling. That is the aim of life in itself. Now, there is an answer to the lower mind that wants to have, the carrot in front so that we pursue this. And the state of awareness that is centered on the lower mind is always, no matter what we do, will be in touch always to conflict and suffering. We go from pleasure to pain, because those are two aspects of the same nature. It is only when we rise up above this pleasure and pain state of consciousness that we can experience what some people call bliss, or whatever you want to call it. Bliss sometimes is imagined as a magnified state of pleasure, when bliss may have nothing to do with sensation of pleasure. But the idea is that by living on the spiritual nature, which is our real nature, we fulfill the purpose of our life. And at the same time, that since we are all connected, that influences the whole humanity. It's just like the atmosphere. You cannot contaminate your atmosphere, the spot where you are. You contaminate the whole atmosphere, or you purify the whole atmosphere. So consciousness is one for the whole humanity. Every time that a person realizes the true nature, that affects the whole humanity to a certain extent. Yeah, here. Wait a second for the mic. So that
you may have already touched on this, but I'm wondering about the third eye that you started out with talking about. I'm wondering what the practical. You just spoke of some of the practical applications of the awakening the pineal gland, but what about awakening the third eye? What
mean
is
like the pituitary gland?
No, the third eye in the
the third eye that is not a third eye, that is not an eye.
Right.
Yeah, that third eye, the Anya chakra is connected, as I said, with the pituitary gland. We all, or at least every educated, cultured person, is awakened on the astral plane. In case you are not familiar with this concept, we have the physical plane, which is the reality we are all aware of through our physical senses. Now, there are also higher dimensions of reality. Again, don't think of this as one on top of the other, they are interpenetrate. But the one that is immediately above us is the astral, it's sometimes called the astral plane. And when we go to sleep, we lose awareness on the physical plane, and then we become aware on the astral plane. Many people are aware, on the astral plane they are like in a bubble. They are aware of life on the astral plane, but not of the environment. That is also true for many people on the physical plane. Many people, they seem to be aware to the environment, but they are only aware to their needs, what they want, and they can hurt somebody, to pursue what they want. And they are just vaguely aware that there is something out there that claims to be alive, but they are not so alive as I am. And so therefore I have to, more right to fulfill my desires than the other person to fulfill his. So on the astral plane, many people are in this state of self-centeredness also, not necessarily aware of the world, the astral world in itself. But many other people are aware, of the astral plane. Again, the lower aspects of the astral plane are very undesirable, and most people are not even aware of those. Nightmares many times come from those levels. And now, we don't need anything. We are already aware on the astral plane, but we don't remember it because there is no connection so far between our waking consciousness and the consciousness the astral consciousness that we experience when we go to sleep. To make that connection, there are several things required. One of them is that the pituitary gland is active. So what the pituitary gland does is to open the door to the astral plane. So brings the awareness of the astral plane to the brain consciousness, to the waking state. So a person that activates the pituitary gland becomes clairvoyant. That means is aware of the aura, which is on the astral plane, or the aspect of the aura that is on the astral plane, because the aura also involves higher planes. It's aware of the chakras that are on the etheric. The etheric plane is like a subtler aspect of the physical, and also there are some chakras on the astral plane. So basically what the pituitary gland does is to open the door to the astral plane. And that's why you become a clairvoyant or clairaudient. Now, how useful that is, it all will depend on your maturity. You know, first, to know that, you know, when a baby opens his eyes or her eyes, it takes a long time to make sense of what he's seeing. The same happens with the astral plane. It takes a lot of time to make sense of what the person is seeing. We have here in the TS many people coming with some problems because they open their eyes on the astral plane and they don't know what they are dealing with. Many times there are entities that are trying to take advantage of you, and it's opening up to a whole new world. You will attract, you know, bad experiences if you are not pure. So that's why it's all the emphasis also on being pure. So you can, if you are a mature person and you develop psychic perceptions, you can help the world also. You know, because you can, some people help in the healing area, some other people help in some areas. Now, there are some people who are, the question always is, what are you doing right now with the powers you have? You know, with your ability, your intelligence, your time, your money, whatever you have. What are you doing? Are you using that to help people in some way? Of course, we have to take care of ourselves also. But are you using that? Then, because some people are completely self-centered with the powers they already have, and they imagine that if they had higher powers, they would use it for the welfare of humanity. For the most part, no. They will use it in a selfish way, and that generates a lot of bad karma. So it all depends on your maturity. If you are already, you know, helping people around, even if it is your family or at work, not necessarily a big thing, but if your attitude is of being helpful, then yeah, probably if you develop, you know, psychic perceptions, you will tend to do the same with that. Now, that is not necessarily going to be of much benefit for you. As I said, usually it produces troubles. And you see many people who are psychic, many of them are unbalanced, or some others are not. It's not a rule. But opening up to a whole new world usually is another source of distraction. So in the theosophical approach, we say, let these things happen whenever they happen naturally. Work on developing your spirituality. And when they open up, you will be mature, wise, you know. The more you become sensitive to the astral realm, that means you become more sensitive to people's feelings and thoughts. You enter in a place, if there is sadness there, you become sad. And we are naturally protected by nature not to feel the things, you know, that are out there. But if you see the world with so much violence, you have to develop first a certain equanimity so that when you are more sensitive and get in touch with all this bombarding of energies, that doesn't throw you, you know, away in your balance. So first you have to develop this equanimity regarding emotions, and then you can safely open up to the emotions of the world. So it is much more trickier than most people think. They think, oh, I can read minds or see auras. Yeah, that's the fun part, but the reality is much more complex than that. Still, there are some people that are mature and nothing, you know, necessarily bad happens. But yeah, there was back there a question. Yeah, you. Wait a second.
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh. What about the people who claim to have connections with angels? And are they working from the astral plane, or is their pineal gland open? What are they?
Some are and some are not. On the and it's very difficult to. I mean, that's not for us to say who is and who is not. But the astral plane is full of different entities. For example, people when they are sleeping, as I said, they are aware on the astral plane. Sometimes you have a dream that you meet a friend, and then the friend calls you, and you hadn't, you know, talked to that friend for some time. That is a very common experience. That's because you met the person on the astral plane when the two of you were sleeping. Now, people who die are also there on the astral plane also for a while, then they go beyond. But bad people who die, they linger on the astral plane for a long time. These people, they don't have the physical body, but they have all their desires. So it's like, you say, okay, I have a particular addiction. If suddenly you cannot fulfill that addiction, you know everything that happens inside of you, when you are trying to quit smoking or whatever it is. Well, that is exactly what happens when a person dies. The person still keeps all the habits, addictions, and all that, but there is no physical body to fulfill that. So it's like the person is forced to be on a diet of whatever that person was addicted to. And these people many times crave to try to get in touch to a person that opens the doors for that and feel the sensations of the person, feel sensations through the person. And that's very, very bad for the person that is open to that. So a person that is in this state and sees that there is a person that has a mediumistic ability is not going to come and say, hey, I'm a dead person, I was very attached to the world, I was a bad person, I want to feel the world through you. He would say, I'm Jesus, you are the chosen one to give a message, or I'm angel, or whatever you have in your mind. Because on the astral plane, everything that you feel and think is right there, so they can see it. So they will say, if you believe in the masters, they will say, I'm a master. Now, sometimes they could be real entities, good entities. It all boils down to me to two things: purity and discernment. Purity will tend to reject the lower entities, and discernment will tell you if this entity is really unselfish. Because the typical is that they will try to flatter you, so you open the doors to them. And the person, great, somebody, from a different realm. As I said, most people think if it is not physical, it is spiritual. So if something spiritual comes to them, the person feels special, unique, and that life has a different meaning. And all that is many times the trap. So all that can happen in most of these people. The pituitary gland at least is much more awakened than in normal people. But as we said, if the state of consciousness is not mature, then that will produce all these problems. So, the answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no. They are not the entities they claim to be. And that's for the person to determine.
Well, because there is a woman who has written many, many books on angelic communication. Mm-hmm. And she claims that she speaks with Archangel Michael. Yeah. Many archangels. Yeah, there are thousands of people today that do that. And many times we have, as I said, frequently people coming saying, I'm in communication with, for some reason, Michael and Gabriel seems to be the most keen to communicate. And we have several people coming and saying that they are in communication with these angels. And sometimes they are saying opposite things. If you go to the internet, you can do the search. You will have like 140,000 pages with people who are channeling. And they many times say opposite things. And, there is also a question, everything that I said tonight, for example, if you don't know about this subject in particular, you will say, oh, this is cool information. Now, if I weren't physically here, if I had died and were on the astral plane and still want to be, I have a craving to be famous, and so I put a name, let's say maybe an Egyptian name, and I tell a person that is sensitive to the astral plane exactly the same that I'm telling today, but I don't have a physical body, that person will naturally assume that I can assume that I'm God. Oh, but see, this information is really deep, really. But if you listen to the same information from a normal person, you would say, yeah, it's okay.
So, all these things are tricky. We have to be careful. Again, I'm not saying that everything is a hoax or that everything is true. But the astral world is much more complex than most people think. And there is certainly room for all these different things. So again, read the information. If the information helps you spiritually, take it. It doesn't matter if it comes from an angel or from a person. If the information really gives you, inspiration or teachings to be more spiritual, well, who cares where it comes from? So judge things according to the information. That is probably the safest. And it doesn't matter if the person claims that it's God or that it's just a person that died and had read a lot of theosophy books in his life.
Can you communicate with your higher self or your divine self?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Yeah. Actually, this spiritual intuition comes from our higher self. The higher self in theosophy is these two principles: manas as the spiritual mind and buddhi, and above it, in the theosophical classification, is Atman, which is like the universal self. This is what we really are, the one self. There is only one self in the universe that is experiencing the universe through all of us. So we are not really different. Now, that universal self experiences through different channels. Each one of us is one of those channels. So that channel is what we call the higher self. So all this practice we are talking about, the higher self is, as I said, with the astral plane. The higher self is on these two planes higher than the astral, and the higher self is already there. The problem is that we are not aware of the higher self. So all these practices, what they are trying to do, is like we are fixed, we have our eyes fixed on a corner, and we are not seeing the whole. So we are fixed on that corner. What we have to do is to stop looking at there and look at the whole. We are fixed on our mind, emotions, and body. But this is not the whole of what we are. Actually, it's a very small fragment. So these practices try to make us look at the whole of what we are and realize what we call our higher self. So yes, all these techniques are helping in that direction.
We have one question from the internet. It says, Pablo, you quoted HPB's views on the ways liquor and drugs interfere with one's spiritual development. Where can we read her comments on specific helps and hindrances to intentional spiritual growth? Where was your quote from?
No, the quote was from the collected writings, the volume 12. The instructions when she was alive, because the Theosophical Society is open to any person and they don't have to believe in anything in particular and they don't have to be committed to any spiritual life. But there were some people that wanted to have a more active discipline. So Blavatsky formed what she called the Eastern section or esoteric section, where she gave teachings more geared towards spiritual practice. So these teachings were published later in the collected writings in the 12th volume in the esoteric teachings. I think there were like 5 instructions that she gave, 5 little pamphlets, and this is the 5th one. If that is the question, that's the source. Mm-hmm. One here, and maybe we can.
Yeah.
One
last question.
I mean, I could stay, but we have to finish.
Pablo, you mentioned alcohol in this previous question here is sort of what I was thinking. Medications, we're on medications now, antidepressants, blood pressure. Are there any connections to practices? And with the alcohol, a lot of that is intention. And when we take medications, the intention is different. Does that speak to...
I think the intention matters a lot. but also the chemical matters. The chemical, whether even if our intention is good, the chemical will produce a certain physical effect. But certainly the intention also adds, more energy in one direction or the other. There are, some medications also, especially medications that affect our perception or the nervous system. They affect all these glands. But, in India, I lived in India for 2 years, and I heard once a comment from a spiritual person there that said, in the West, people believe too much in the need to take medicines even for life. And this person was saying, I don't think that's really necessary. So it's a cultural thing also. And I always wonder, how much medicine we really need or not. And I try to avoid it as much as possible, but sometimes we need medicine, and that's a fact. And if we need some medicine that may affect the pineal gland and the pituitary gland, that's fine. We have so much to do purifying our motivation, expanding our spiritual understanding of the world, that if we have to do it, just do it and work on spirituality in a more general way. We have a lot to do. But now, if it is something you can choose, and if you are really serious and say, this is really vital for me, then try to avoid it.